My name's Justin Berenbaum. I'm filling in for Jason De La Roca, who managed to skip out on the conference for some funny reasons. The first question I was going to actually take and ask is figure out why he missed it, but I'll just be honest, he hurt himself. So we'll keep it short and sweet. First, I'm going to let everybody do quick introductions, kind of who they are and where they work, in case you don't know, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that since it's public. And then we're just going to fire off a bunch of questions about publishing, and then I have a few grenades to throw in the room. So, Alex, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex Nichiporchik. I co-founded tinyBuild about 5 years ago as an indie studio, and we're working on Flash games, trying to get them onto Steam unsuccessfully. It took us a couple of years. But when we finally did, that was before the saturation, and we kind of just got into publishing by sheer coincidence. We were co-developing a game called Speedrunners, and then Kotaku posted an article from PAX saying, oh, tinyBuild is now publishing indies like Devolver, so that was fun. That's kind of how we got there and started publishing third-party games, and now we have 2 studios, one in Amsterdam, one in Seattle. Those are working on own IP and porting, and we work with about 20 third-party teams, mostly from Eastern Europe or Russia, Belarus, Ukraine.
All right, Steve, you want to real quick?
Hi, my name is Steve Escalante. I'm the founder of Versus Evil. We've been in business now for about 4 years. Prior to Versus Evil, I was at Bethesda Softworks. So we started Versus Evil as an indie games publisher, and right out of the gate, so the first game that we signed was the Banner Saga. So we published Banner Saga 1 and 2. We started primarily as a PC publishing house, and then we immediately grew into mobile and now console. So we publish across all major platforms, including all different business models as well. So we have premium and free-to-play as well. So premium on mobile, which is also kind of a different business, which makes us a little bit unique, but we have the full gamut there as well. We're also, one of the big things that we're doing this year, we are in cooperation with a group down in Brazil, is we are setting up a whole kind of studio there as well. So all in-house QA, in-house outsourcing, all that fun stuff to help support our teams with porting, with engineering, with art, and all those different things as well from an indie resource perspective.
Jesse?
Jesse Divnich, Vice President of QuickByte Games, which is the subsidiary of Burnham, based in Montreal, where I oversee marketing, production, as well as publishing. Prior to that, I started up a company called Tilting Point, a publishing company based in New York, still doing very well. And then prior to that, part of the startup team of a research firm called EDAR, which recently just got acquired by MPD. So I've been on kind of all sides of the fence, both as an indie, as a developer, and as a publisher. So hopefully I can provide some knowledge here.
And Justin, last but not least.
So a couple roles. Previously with Devolver Digital and South by Southwest Gaming, I created all the gaming stuff that South by Southwest actually had for 7 years. Switched both roles now, so I have 2 roles now. Again, because I like having 2 roles. For some reason I can't get enough. I'm now with Devolver-owned Gambitious Digital, publishing PC, console, have some big announcements probably in the next 6 days, and also creative director of DreamHack for all North America.
All right, so the title of the talk was, I guess, kind of how to pitch publishers. So we're going to go through this quickly because I think there's been a ton of talks on this, and then we're going to talk about some stuff that maybe isn't usually asked. So I guess the first thing I want to ask of the panel, and anybody can kind of jump in, as a publisher, what gets your attention from a developer? What actually excites you? What do you see that actually makes you go, I need to talk to those guys? What is it that gets you super psyched to talk to somebody about publishing their game?
Seeing something on the front page of Reddit. Funny GIF. No, literally, that's how I reached out to Clustertruck. Says I'm on Reddit. It was the launch day for Punch Club when we did Twitch-based Punch Club. And it's like chaos, our forums are exploding, and I go to Reddit to, like 5 minutes, oh, nice GIF, and then an hour later I'm on the call juggling a launch and then signing Clustertruck.
Okay.
I think there's a multitude of reasons why it gets excited. It could be just a prototype, a build, a demo, vertical slice. It could be just a great PowerPoint presentation, a good team, good pedigree of people. There's so many reasons that there's no one magic bullet as to what gets me, at least, a lot of us excited when we think about publishing a title.
I absolutely agree. I'll highlight 3 things, but other than that, yeah, multitude of things. One, some kind of standout thing, art, narrative, something to stand out that makes you go, oh, wow. And the other thing is also, in terms of the pitch, I am very passionate having kind of joined the game industry back in '07 after losing everything in the financial industry. So I like seeing that passion from the person pitching the product or talking about the product, because then I can get behind that passion. And then the third thing, I use my kids. I use my kids to look at something that, of course, unless it's under NDA, use my kids to kind of look and get their 15-year-old opinion and my 11-year-old opinion, and that kind of helps me too a lot of times for the demographic.
I was just going to add one more thing that's actually really important is I believe that there's three things that I really look at that will get me excited right away is the people, the team, and the company structure, right? You can have great people, but they can work very horribly together. And I always use the reference of like, NBA or Olympic basketball. We, the USA, have dominated it for so long, but then there was that one year where we lost to Puerto Rico, and I thought we owned Puerto Rico, and that was like one of LeBron's James' first year. Like we had the dream team, and we couldn't even win a freaking medal, and we had the great people, but they just didn't work well as a team. And then when it comes to company structure, sometimes you can have a great game. You can show me a great game, and you can have great people and have a great team, but if at the very top, the structure of your company is so convoluted, there's different investors, maybe there's governments involved. I mean, all three have to come together. That's something I look at almost right away when evaluating a developer or a game.
Okay. So I want to step in real quick, and then I'm going to jump around so people find it confusing. We can fix it later with questions. What do you think is the biggest misconception most developers have of publishers and publishing right now? Misconception. Something that most developers don't know or don't understand about publishing right now. And I know it's kind of a weird question. So.
Well, I think for me, a lot of the times we're getting asked, we're very rarely going up against other publishers. It's a lot of times it's more, can I do it myself?
Yeah.
So
so what do you say to somebody who's got a good game that you want to sign, but they're like, we're going to do it ourselves?
Right, and because it's a good game. So most people generally know when they have a good thing, and you really do. There's a lot of times where you're hoping to kind of catch lightning in a bottle, and the reality basically is there's a lot of times you kind of need to look in the mirror and go, we need to make some adjustments because it's not quite there. It's like, what's the hook? If you really truly don't know what the hook is, and it's not just a reskin of something, then you really do know that. So I think a lot of times it is, I've got a good game, what are you going to do for me? And what I have found over the years has been, it's just the acquisition of time. So it's not necessarily about dollars, or it's about me funding the game, or even just committing marketing dollars or things like that. Sure, we have advertising experience and all those different things, but it's really just educating them on the amount of time. So it's not impossible. I'm not going to sit here and say that Versus Evil or anybody else is smarter than anybody else in terms of how we can publish a game. But I think the biggest misunderstanding is how much time it really takes to just focus on PR, good influencer management, advertising, and the whole nine yards, and the benefit that kind of provides to your team. That's probably the number one.
I was trying to find a situation, remember one, and then I finally have it now. To answer your question, the situation was that me and the Punch Club guys were standing at the conference, just chatting, and then someone comes by, drags the Punch Club guys away, and just goes like from me, and it goes, okay, but I know that Alex says that you never pay influencers, but really, come on, how much did they pay? How much did they withhold you? And I think that's like the biggest misconception, at least that I see, that hey, can you like guarantee us that these YouTubers will pay? No, we don't. We did experiment with paid advertising to influencers, and it just didn't work. And that was right before the AAAs got in there with their big money, and that was a kind of fun turning point. So what we know is that the biggest misconception is I will go to an indie publisher and then I will have the next big success automatically. That a publisher will guarantee that success. So the thing that I always ask developers is, okay, well, how much money do you need to survive? And often we work with teams who are making their first games without much experience. So it's funny because I will sometimes have to negotiate upwards to a better deal to developers. in terms of budgets, because they come to me with a budget going like, okay, we need X. I'm like, okay, where does X get you? Oh, 2 lunch months. Well, have you thought about the fact that, all platforms pay on the net 45 schedule, and that you will actually get your money about 45, 50 days after the month is over? Oh, no, we didn't think about that. Oh, did you think that if you're in this country, there is a high risk of your funds being frozen until a contract is presented to the bank and to the tax control and everything? No, well, we need to budget for that, and we need to budget for this. How do you do your
Tax
income
withholding.
taxes? Oh, you don't do income taxes. Well, now, so budget that. It's a lot of these comedic situations, and I think that they fall under the misconception that it's, you're going to go with publisher X, they did release game Y, and your game is going to be super successful. So we always try to downplay the expectations there, and make sure that, okay, what is actually, how much money do you actually need? And if that expectation is way too high, then, it's a totally different discussion to be had. It needs to be realistic. And then I think when you level with devs, talk realistic, we went through that. We actually had a publisher signed 5 years ago for our first game, and they just bailed on us because they also published Super Meat Boy in Russia, and that game didn't sell for them in retail. Retail in Russia didn't sell. Who knew 5 years ago? And they just go, oh, we're not going to pay you for the advance that we owed you. So we went through that, and I think the framing all of those discussions in that context helped us a lot.
Yeah, but I do think these misconceptions are based in reality. I mean, there are some pretty shitty publishers out there. And I like Mel's slide where she listed out all the different things that a publisher does. And sure, a lot of us up here, we do them well. I'm not going to badmouth anyone. But yes, there are crappy publishers out there. They'll do a bad job in some of those areas. So we talk about a misconception, but most misconceptions are actually rooted in some form of reality.
It's why the indie space was created. I mean, most of these kids that we're talking to, I say kids, I just said kids. I'm such an old man.
Because you're old.
Most of these younger teams do not have the true history of the bad deals where you're working with the bigger companies. And those deals were painful. So yeah, they don't even have that history. In fact, I find it's been easier for me to talk to a more experienced team. They generally want more money, but all the contract points are extremely easier because they've all been raked across the coals, or they've all seen those bad deals. So as soon as they kind of get the points that we've presented to them, like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Whereas the younger guys are just a little newer to the process, and they, of course, want to push every contract that they can. But
well, on every point, including ones that don't matter.
Right. But the point is I think Jesse's right. It's the indie space was built off of the fact that there was a bunch of bad, really shitty publishing deals that was done, and people have been the creators of the content have never been really truly rewarded.
And equally so, there's been really bad independent developers as well too. So it goes on both sides, people. All right.
Yeah. No. So, Alex, I'm going to jump. You kind of mentioned the thing, and so I'm going to jump into a question I had later on, which is how should a smaller developer plan to stay afloat between the time they ship a game and the time they might actually start seeing money? And we know the reality is that they usually aren't going to see money for 3 to 6 months. By the time the game starts making money, there's earnouts, whatever else.
Where did you hear that?
20 years of experience, maybe?
All right, so 3 to 6 months. Why?
Well, between the 45 days and depending on how much success they have day one, and then earning out if there's an earnout.
That's true. Just trying to juggle some NDAs here. If your game doesn't make a developer money in 3 months, you have failed. If the game has a bad launch and you don't have the means to make the budget back in some shape or form, be that via deals, via the Humble Monthly was a great example for a couple of games that have launched and then not necessarily have done that. Then that's quite bad. So how do you do that? Well, you always have to have a plan B. You always have to plan for the worst, hope for the best. So the way that I usually advise people is we just signed a game that's not announced, right? It got pitched to me a year ago. And a year ago, it was in kind of mediocre shape, right? It just wasn't there. The core idea was there, but it just wasn't fun. So the developer goes and comes up to me and goes like, hey, give me a huge amount of money. I'm going to go full-time on this. I'm like, okay, what do you do now? He's like, oh, I do outsourcing and some back-end large system development, something. So he makes a decent amount of money for his burn rate. So I'm like, okay, spend the next year on polishing this game out, get a Discord channel, like start testing and whatnot. And when it is at a point where it's on the front page of Reddit, or that you see some metrics, or that I can play a game and actually enjoy it a lot, that's when you come to me and we'll talk about full time. Guess what? He did that, and then he actually saved up enough money to cut half of the budget that he requested initially. And now we're working on this, and then we're prepared for anything to fail. Just because, come on, well, Steam Direct, that's one thing. All of the platforms are getting saturated. Discoverability is shit. So you have to prepare to fail. It's not an industry that you go into expecting success. So does that answer your question?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I had the answer in my mind already, which is
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure other people had it.
Just to riff off that as well. I mean, we've done the same thing in terms of teams. Like, what is your expectations in terms of revenue? Because a lot of times we'll get pitches, and it's like, look at the competitive titles, look at what they've done. And I always usually chuckle at those slides.
Hey,
I'm
look
like,
at the Ark.
That's right. They did this many years. I'm like, they did. They did.
What? I'm not shipping the next Ark? Come on.
And it's always a challenge, because you try not to blow the wind out of a developer's sails and say, I'm not saying you can't do that, but these are the really good successes in those genres. But it's really more of like, what do you need to survive? But it's also, how do you consider success? Like, and a lot of times the answer usually will float around, as long as we can make our next game. And usually those numbers are relatively reasonable. It's like, don't put your head in the clouds to, I want to have 20 people now, all these different things. Like, what can you do to get to your next product? That's a good success. In this business, that's a really good success. So you kind of plan for and expect for the tough failures, because everyone's dealing with it. We don't have any secret sauce with discoverability. Discoverability is hard for everyone. It's a challenge for everyone. So it's just, how do you plan? How do you make the best choices in terms of what you spend and where? But really just kind of looking at those financials in terms of what gets you to revenue and what gets you to your next project, because that's the reality, is you want to survive for the next day.
I usually talk to them about their outlook first. I want to see what they think they should go to retail with, what they think their benchmarks are, like if they're actually going to compare it to Ark. If they have a $25 game in their head when it should be a $14.99 game in their head. Because a lot of times those expectations need to be kind of brought down to reality to get them to also think about planning that kind of padding of a month, 2 months, 3 months after the game. So it's kind of, for me at first, one of the things that I usually try to do is really feel them out. Because some people think they have something better than they actually really do market-wise. So it's grounding them in reality and then going from there to keep that kind of padding outlook.
All right, so this kind of led right into one of the other questions I was going to ask. How do you guys judge success? Is it purely on profit? Is it on units? Is it on, and Steve, you kind of mentioned is like the developer being able to make their next game. How do you guys judge success from
the next game? I think, like was said, if the developer is able to make his next game, if it's funded off their own revenue, then that's the ideal scenario. And then if they liked working with you, they will still keep on working with you. So that's when the developer wins and the publisher wins.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We publish some really niche titles, where we're not expecting to sell 1 million units. Would we love to? Of course. Who doesn't want to sell 1 million units? But we're not publishing it for that. We're publishing it because we like the game and we like the team. It's really pretty much that simple. I'm old enough now that it's just more of like, I just kind of work with people that I like, because you're going to have, and I think it's really important. I mean, I didn't really chime in on the publisher pitch thing, but an important thing for me is, do I like these people? And it's really important. It seems kind of shallow to some degree, but the reason why you need to like these people is because you're going to have some tough conversations. And if you don't like each other and it's already contentious and you bring up tough points that you're going to have during the development process, it's going to turn into an ugly conversation and not get back to work.
It turns into divorce, right?
It does, and it's tough. So you got to really kind of respect each other and be able to have what I call like the big boy, big girl conversations, where everyone's got their big boy pants on, and we're going to have some reality conversations. And so we look at it more of like we had They launched the game that they wanted to launch. They're proud about the game they wanted to launch. They didn't cut features or things like that because for whatever reason. They got the reviews that we hoped and expected because we liked the game concept and because we had a good team. So for us, we're just, that's success for us, And then, of course, the ultimate success is, yes, of course, we need to get them to their next game, obviously. And I 100% agree. If we've written our contracts in such a way that it's like, you're not required to work with us on your next game. But if we've done our job, the hope is that, we will work together.
I really like the comment about liking other people. There are situations in the contract negotiations when, and actually, contrary to what you said, it's mostly with experienced teams that have been burned by other publishers. It's like everyone is negotiating, but everyone has their hands on the trigger at any given time, just to pull out the gun, just in case. And
that's the inherent mistrust I think that's been built up. So.
I think so. It's just that I really hate it when devs come to a publisher expecting okay, you guarantee that our game is going to be successful, but then during the negotiation, it's very hostile. It's like there's no trust, there's no mutual respect, and that's when deals just fall through, just because there is no will to work together. And I think the problem there is we talked about the previous experiences, which I actually didn't touch the AAA segment. I got into the industry by casual games, so it's a different world for me. And whenever I hear these horror stories, I'm like, holy crap! Or when you hear the conditions that some older industry people propose, you go, yeah, we're really undercharging, things like that.
I think for myself, it's two things. It's one, profit. We're all here to make money, and we want to ensure that both sides make money. And the second thing is, do both parties want to work with each other again? And if you can make a profit...
Wait, you're in this industry for money?
Yeah.
You're doing something wrong.
Yeah, he should leave now.
Yeah,
seriously, you don't go into this business for money.
Okay. How do I respond to that? I completely agree. It's a very risky business. When my company EDAR got acquired, I got approached by a lot of people that wanted me to invest in their video game company, and I said, investing in gaming companies is the worst investment. Just put that money in healthcare, electricity, put it in oil. Right? Just do that. Don't invest in video games. But profit is very important because that's what gets you to your next game. Where else is the money going to come from? If someone has to be making money?
Well, as a publisher, you have a portfolio of games, right? And then if if one of the games flops, you use your portfolio power to get a portfolio deal with a platform or something like that. And then you mitigate the risk. That's why you need to make sure that whatever happens with a game, that the budgets are not overboard, and that you're not going to have a situation where the developer goes, oh yeah, that crappy publisher, they didn't sell my game.
You still have to make a profit. You don't have to make a profit off of every game, but that needs to be a goal, and it is a measurement of success. And
you got to make money somewhere.
No industry can survive unless somebody is making money.
Well, yes.
It's not coming from the money tree. I don't know.
You don't have one in your backyard?
No, I don't.
To frame the context, I don't think you fully understand what I mean. I mean that the money conversation, right? You're saying that each game has to make a certain amount of profit.
Not each.
Not each.
But that is a measurement of success.
Right. What I'm saying is that as a publisher, you take risks. It's essentially like investing. So you know that upfront, you know that not all games are going to be profitable for you. But you need to make sure as a publisher that the developer makes some money.
Okay, I agree. I think we're on the same page. You're looking at it more from a portfolio perspective. I understand.
Of course. Otherwise, why would you be publishing?
But there are some cases where people have not made a profit, but as long as both parties would agree to work with each other again, that's another measurement of, I would say, success, if they would work with each other again.
Right.
And if you're an independent developer, talk to the publishers or talk to the other independent developers that work with publishers, and if you've seen they've only worked with them once and then they went somewhere else, there's probably a good reason.
Okay, so I'm going to skip to the next thing because we touched on it again, so I'm kind of jumping around. So and Steve, again, you mentioned it. So what's a big red flag for you guys? When you're having a conversation with a developer, what's something that's in common with most of them that then sets a red flag in your mind? What's one of the common mistakes they make during discussions, or what's one of the things you see that just usually raises that red flag and often kills the deal?
I it certainly starts with personality, I would say. Not to harp on that, but if it's just too hard,
Like
then I will
negotiating an NDA takes 6 weeks.
yes, like agreements take too long, or if it's just, I think Alex says it in a way, it's like people are just kind of pulling out their guns whenever they can on certain points, and it's just like everything is like a fight. I just walk, I'd rather like, listen, I like you guys, I like your game, good luck, I'm out. Like it's just too hard. It shouldn't be that hard. So that's kind of step one. I think step two also does revolve a little bit about unrealistic expectations, and that could involve a few different things. We tried, and we don't try to assert ourselves too much from the creative point of view, but we do try to come in with third parties at an agnostic level of what is a competitive feature set for your game, for your genre. How is it going to stand up against the others? So when you start comparing your game to others and how you're going to compete, and then you have a pretty big but in there, but we don't have online multiplayer. Like, ooh, well, that's kind of a big one. So you're not like that game because that game is built with their online multiplayer, or statements like that. So depending on how realistic they are with their game and how it will be competitive, and just to put it in the simplest terms, if they really truly have a hook, and if they don't, then it does reveal itself early on in the process, and that's the big red flag. If you don't have your hook really nailed and it doesn't come out within the first few minutes of conversation of what your hook is, that could kill it pretty quickly.
Justin, I want to throw this over to you, since Devolver's always had a very unique approach in a niche, and then obviously now with innovation. So tell me a little bit about what's a red flag for you guys. Because you guys pick some stuff that almost nobody else picks. So
That's a nice way of putting it, yeah. I'm going to echo some of Steve. Honestly, I couldn't agree more.
I actually want to hear the concrete decision between on the winner game. You know what I'm talking about?
I was actually
the
surprised.
thought process.
I was surprised about that one myself, so I can't quote on that one. But in all honesty, we're just trying to have fun. I mean, that's just, if you can't tell, our kind of model with whether it's Devolver or Gambitious now, that's just kind of our thing. We are game players, but things that will kill a deal immediately, difficult to work with, absolutely. Because we're trying to have fun, we don't want it to be like work. And if it is like work, there's a problem for us. Besides that, realistic expectations is absolutely one. I touched on that earlier. But I'll even go one further is reputation. We really like to do our homework. With all the different things that I've done in the past regarding like South by Southwest and all these, I was at with Dice Summit, so all these things, I have a big black book. So what I truly try to do myself personally is I do my homework on who is this developer, where did they come from, have they burned any bridges, are they just behaving because they're in conversation with me? Because you really can't tell, because they're trying to sell not only themselves but also their game and their idea and their concept and all these other things. And sometimes, people are on their best behavior. And then all of a sudden, after you do some digging, you realize there's some reputation things there that could come out later in the deal after you sign it.
And by the way, I'm going to add, that goes for the other side too. As a developer, do your homework on the publishers you're talking to. One thing that's a big red flag to me, if somebody pitches a game to me that doesn't fit with the portfolio that we have, and it's just so out there, the budget's so...
I have so many free-to-play pitches in my inbox. It's crazy. Hey, tinyBuild, publish my match 3 game. Like, what?
Yeah, well, I love that when we were 505, the pitches I would get for $10-15 million, and I'm like, have you seen the budgets we work with? So I turned that around and said, do your homework as well from both sides.
And I would say that most of our teams actually have. I've been caught a couple times where it's like I'm having a dinner with one of our new teams, and I introduce them to the guys, and they're like, "Oh no, we already met." It's like, "Oh," and so yeah, we checked up on you, Steve, and we called these guys, and so you should absolutely check up and just make sure that the publisher's not overselling themselves to some extent, and do they have good relationships with their teams, and if they don't, then that will be revealed pretty quickly.
The biggest turnoff for me, like when the conversation usually stops, is the build. When I play the build, and often developers will try to say, oh, no, so this will be fixed, that will be fixed. I'm not expecting a high level of polish. I'm not expecting good art. I'm expecting something that plays well on the prototype level, if it's a prototype or if it's a little bit more polished. But It's simple things like, okay, it would have taken you 30 seconds to move this block over here, or like to have this UI highlight. I really like it when the prototype pitches have that, just like the really simple, cheap levels of polish. That's when you know that had this developer had an actual budget, then this would be much more polished up.
Well, I always say find the fun first. So I think this kind of leads into one of the questions I was going to ask. When is the best time for somebody to pitch you their game?
So we published Party Hard was a Game Jam game, Clusterfuck was a Game Jam game. To a certain degree, Phantom Trigger and Divide by Sheep were. So all of those games, they have been created in a matter of days, or sometimes even hours. And if at that level, if something is created in such a short time, gets attention, is a lot of fun, then you know that it's worth investing. So if you have a successful Game Jam game, that's a really good time. Like, don't even spend time on polishing, just show the build, show the list specs. Or if you're actually, like doing it the proper way, as soon as you have something worth sharing, as soon as you have something that's fun, if it's fun and it looks like crap, that's easier to fix than a game that looks great. That's not fun.
I would just say, anytime you're developing a game, you always have core pillars that make your game unique in some way. Just make sure the right time to pitch is when they're in there. If you're telling me you're making a first-person zombie shooter and it's all about decapitation, there's blood and guts everywhere, but then the build and prototype you're sharing with the publishers doesn't have that, then we can't we can envision it, but we need to see it. It has to be there.
No, I always say don't expect us to get your vision. You need to show it, right?
Yeah.
So
So there's really no right time. I mean, in free-to-play mobile, unfortunately, we want you to be in soft launch so we can see your metrics.
KPIs.
I really hate that shit.
I know, but
it
is what it is.
I know. I mean, no, seriously. If you actually are good at free-to-play and you've been around, you see the mechanics. You should at least at Tilting Point and the stuff we did. We've done a really good job predicting our soft launch KPIs before going into soft launch. So it does actually piss me off a little bit when a publisher says, "Well, wait till you get into soft launch." And
well, that's just removing risk. But
I know it is to remove some of the risk, but that is generally the best time to start pitching publishers. You can pitch them earlier. I actually say pitch them early so you can at least get your game on their radar. But you really won't get into serious discussions until you get some KPIs.
I say one sentence. I'll keep it short. I literally could copy paste this from every email, every phone conversation. Whenever you feel the most comfortable where your product may be, to show me the vision of where it needs to go. That's it. That's literally the same sentence I say all the time.
That's perfect.
So no rush. So
Yeah, for me,
Definitely don't rush.
I'm making a mental note of that one.
Right. But just saying kind of what you guys are saying a little bit differently though as well, is there is a tremendous amount of content that's out there. So, unfortunately, just getting a deck isn't necessarily enough anymore. It used to be back in the day, right? Because you just, at the end of back in the day, you can only basically pitch a design doc and have a nice deck and try to get that funded. And that's how you got your stuff funded back in the day. But today, there's so much content that, to be just selfish, I can generally just kind of say, well, when you have a demo, come and talk to me. Because, quite frankly, there are so many other guys that are pitching me demos that I don't have to get there with you and manifest something creatively in my mind, which might be different from what's creatively in your mind, because I haven't been able to play what you are describing to me. But
So-
if you have a good vertical slice and you have a good playable demo, which is what everyone is saying in different ways, that is the best time, because, quite frankly, there are a lot of companies that have it, so I can make that
I would say in
decision.
the last 7 years, the only title I signed that was primarily a pitch deck was Abzu. And the only reason we signed that is because it was Matt Nava, who was the key guy on Journey and Flower. So you just believed he could have just shown you an empty plate of food, and you would have believed he could have made anything out of it. Sure. So unless you've got that experience, then I don't necessarily believe you can do it. So I think we've got about 12 minutes left. Anybody have questions? I'm going to open it up, and then we'll go back if anybody doesn't have questions. But I want to give the audience some time to ask questions. You got one over here.
Okay, so I have a very playable game, but the feeling is that in order to sell it successfully, I want to involve one or possibly two serious celebrities whose name is known to everybody, which requires a large purchase of IP rights. Maybe somebody could comment on how you would handle that.
I would try and go to the company that owns those IPs just directly, and then maybe they're right now interested in expanding into games. Most of the people here, I don't think, like if we're talking like AAA celebrities, that would be quite difficult. I don't know, maybe you guys have some ideas.
I guess I can step in there real quick, having been at Activision and been involved in a whole lot of AAA celebrities that we shouldn't have signed, and a few that we should have. I agree, in this day and age, there's very few celebrities or agents that aren't aware of the game space and aren't interested in doing something. So if you have a really good game that you think is really great and it fits that celebrity really well, I would just go find their agent and talk to them directly. And if you don't know how to do that, there's plenty of people. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend, from my side, going to do that first and seeing if they have an interest, if they have an exclusive, get that information first so you can move on quickly if they do.
Yeah, or try to work out some agreement where there's some minimum guarantee up front and then royalties on the back end. I mean, at Hibernian we have the Bruce Lee IP, and obviously I won't go into how we negotiate that, but yeah, right now a lot of the bigger celebrities, they know what they're worth and they want a lot of money up front. What I would say is maybe don't go for the AAA celebrities, maybe go for the AA or A, the ones that everyone knows.
Or the past AAA celebrities.
Or the past AAA, but whatever the case.
It's arguably one of the most unfun agreements to ever negotiate.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Yeah.
I also encourage you to be very diligent in how you go about approaching them. But they are aware, and most of them understand and are willing to take back end instead of big front ends, except for the Tom Cruises of the world.
There's a couple of organizations I know where they use celebrities in their games, and what they actually were able to negotiate was the celebrities took a part ownership into the actual company that was developing the game. And yeah, I've seen 2 organizations do that pretty successfully.
Just make sure that they're absolutely essential to the game if you're doing it.
And make sure they're an endemic fit, meaning that if I walked up and played the game, and it would be a naturally go, oh god, this totally makes sense.
Yeah, and they haven't been in rehab in the last 6 months.
Unless the game's on rehab.
Yes.
Hopefully that helped a little bit. But most of these people are really easy to get to. So between LinkedIn and their agents, you can look up. Well, you can look up IMDb, and usually their agents you can track down their agents through IMDb.
Yep. All
right, so here's a question. This came from my crowdsourcing on Facebook. What's something that you guys haven't done well that you can do to be better for developers?
Oh my god!
Hey, come on.
We could do something doing better individually, or as an industry, as publishers, as an industry.
Pick.
I'm just gonna go global. I'm gonna go broad. No, because there is one thing. It's communication. It's actually having more direct and frequent communication with independent developers. Right now, I see too many publishers. They'll do like weekly recaps, monthly recaps. They don't give developers access to some of the analytics tools and the dashboards, and we have to wait sometimes weeks to get this information. So I think we as publishers need to do a better job at that. And I would say that, yes, even myself, we need to do a better job with constant communication with our developers to show that not only we care and we're paying attention, but we actually are not like us sending weekly reports, but we actually are looking at this data every day. We just need to find a way in which we can deliver that on a daily basis. And I don't believe there's a thing as too much information.
Okay. Anybody else got something that
I think the best one here was, when you do the timeline, the actual timeline, and then you do the internal timeline, when, you say, all right, the Gold Master is going to be on, August 1st. No, you actually internally, you gotta go, like, August 20th, because delays will happen as game development. I think going more aggressive on the internal timeline that no one actually knows, that's the one that I think we should do better. I don't know. You don't guys do that? No?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we.
See, I was hoping we'd give up some secrets here.
Well, it's not really secrets. It's just, and I'm going to say this because I say this to the team specifically, so I'm not saying anything to embarrass them. But and actually we work with several teams in Brazil, so they're not going to know which one. But we kind of say on Brazilian time.
Half of time.
Because it's just a little, in some regards, most of them have just been late. But to be fair, most of our developers have been late. So, but yes, we literally have that exact conversation. This is when it's going to come out. Let's just say it's going to come out in August. So we're like, all right, so that's really Q4. And then we start actually going, well, then Q4 is really bad. So we're not going to launch a game in August. August is already challenging. I'm not going to go up against the AAAs maybe in November to December. That's just focus. And then we're looking at Q1. So keeping that internal is potentially a problem because then, to Alex's really earlier point, is are they able to survive till Q1? Because that becomes the big question.
That's the external versus internal budget as well. That's a separate discussion.
That's right.
All right, so I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask this question, and then we'll see if anybody on the panel has anything else they want to add. So one of the questions I have, and this is something I got from my buddy Jamie, what are a couple core things that all the developers you signed over the last couple years all have in common? They all have to have something in common. What are the couple?
I like all of them.
What?
I like working with them.
Okay, well that's a big thing. So what are a couple things that are, I would call the green flag, something that really, when you get a pitch from a developer, maybe somebody you haven't even worked with before, that almost all the pitches that you signed have in common?
It's about that communication part that we talked about, right? When you are talking with someone and then you feel like you're adding value to them, even before you start talking terms or anything, you just start, to talk about the games, talk about the fun things that you can do with that. I really enjoyed that part. And if we align and we just start brainstorming and bouncing ideas off each other, that's a really good feeling, and that will manifest into a good relationship.
I agree with that. Like, if you have a geek out session with them, and I do that all the time, where it's like, I don't know if we're going to work together, but you should totally do this. And you start kind of riffing on some of the fun things you can do. That's a really good sign. For us, the other big thing I would say is art. If you look at all of our games, you could take a screenshot of that game, and I don't have to necessarily spend money on a branding campaign to kind of come up with some big key art thing or whatever. Banner Saga looks unique. Gilded Engineering looks unique. Anti-Hero looks unique. Like, they all have their own unique look, and that's been consistent across most of the games because we don't have the millions of dollars to spend on branding campaigns and things like that. We need a screenshot to be able to go, oh, that's Banner Saga. Oh, that's Gilded Engineering. And people kind of know that product just by a really simple screen grab.
I would say this is both good and bad. The passion. That's really what I run into personally a lot of times, which is actually what I'm looking for anyways. But these are the creatives. They're really doing everything they can to bring their product to life. Some leaving their jobs, some working 14, 16-hour days, some ignoring their family. God knows what. That's both bad and good, because the reason I also say the other thing they have in common is that they also believe sometimes that they're the next best thing in that genre. When there's not those features that are standing out. They're so passionate about their product that it actually hurts them in the fact that they think they might be bringing something the world has never seen before. And we as publishers have to be, or we should be, very honest with them. I am, obviously. I'm sure we all are up here to kind of manage those expectations. But again, passion can go bad or good. I think that's what I run into.
Well, I'll call it passion with a business brain.
Yeah.
Understanding the business with the passion. Jesse, anything to add that they all have in common?
I'm trying to think. There's every contract and publishing and development deal I've done has always been different. There's really no commonality outside of we're both equally excited when we sign the contract. But okay, that's the only thing. Otherwise, everything has been completely different. I mean, I've worked with some really big jerks in this industry and worked with them and been very successful. But those expectations were set ahead of time that they were going to be jerks. But the game did well.
Well, that's why.
Anyways, not to get into specific. I just don't think there's anything. There's one common thing that's true for publisher-developer relationship.
Well, I think there's commonality in games. For me, it's professionalism. Like, they can be indie, but understanding the business. To me, the better and more educated the developer is on the actual business of games, the easier our deals are, because they don't think I'm trying to fool them or hide anything from them. So, a lot of the process I've always found is educating them on the business if they don't know it very well. Also, you said passion. For me, it's the passion with a purpose. So knowing what they're building and who they're building it for is a big. So that's kind of what it's. and this is one of the reasons our lawyers always hitting me. I never did a deal that was the same. Every deal I did was different. So I really wasn't looking for the deal because every game is different, but most of them have something in common when you're going to sign. It's either the leadership or the game developer or how many people up here have signed a game in the last year that's over $1 million?
Revenue or?
No, just in budget, the budget you're spending. Okay, so, but it's not saying, but the reason you signed those, there was something in common.
We're developing it.
Okay. Any other questions? Because I think we're all just about out of time. So anybody else got anything they want to ask? All right, so we can all curse. We can all curse at Jason. Thank everybody for the panel for being here. If anybody's got questions afterwards, I'm sure most of us will be around.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Everybody.